There is a fungus whose name invariably instills fear in people. The black fungus. But actually, black fungus is not the name of a fungus. It's a disease caused by certain fungi, technically known as mucormycosis. This disease mainly affects people already infected with other diseases or those who have low immunity, like people with COVID-19. Talk about kicking a man when he's already down. Mucormycosis can cause severe symptoms like blindness, seizures, and even death. Any idea which organism is responsible for such tyranny? Believe it or not, these organisms are generally found growing in our kitchens. Remember the fungus growing on bread called rhizopus? When the spores from this very fungus enter a vulnerable patient, it can cause mucormycosis. Shocked? So was I when I heard this for the very first time. Another fungus responsible for this disease is mucor, which you can usually see growing on rotting fruits. Both these deadly two-faced fungi belong to the class Phycomycetes, one of the 4 classes of kingdom fungi. Earlier, scientists thought they saw some resemblance between this class of fungi and algae. That's why they called them algal fungi. But this term has now become obsolete. Now, you know that Phycomycetes like rhizopus and mucor grow on decaying food materials such as stale bread and fruits. Apart from that, they also are seen growing on decaying woods in damp and moist places. Some Phycomycetes are also found in aquatic habitats. All these organisms are saprophytic in nature because they depend on dead and decaying organisms for their nutrition. But not all Phycomycetes live on dead and decaying organisms. There are some fungi which grow inside live plants. For example, the fungus albugo. It lives inside plants like mustard. That is, it is parasitic to the plants and causes diseases in them. That's mean, isn't it? But think about it from albugo's point of view. It simply can't live on its own. It is completely dependent on a live plant for its nutrition and survival. Parasites that can't live without their host organisms, which in this case is the mustard plant, are called obligate parasites. So Phycomycetes may differ in terms of how they get their food, some of them being parasites and others depending on decaying vegetation. But all of them have one thing in common. They have cenocytic or aseptate hyphae. All multicellular fungi are either septate or aseptate. In septate fungi, the hyphae have cross walls or septa. These septa divide a hypha into many cells, each of which has one nucleus. In the case of aseptate fungi, which are also called cenocytic fungi, the hyphae do not have septa or cross walls. This means that each hypha is one long cell with many nuclei in it. Other than aseptate hyphae, the thing that is common between all the members of Phycomycetes, and in fact all fungi, is that they reproduce by spores. Let's take a look at how they reproduce. Phycomycetes produce spores by means of both asexual and sexual reproduction. The asexual spores they produce are called sporangiospores. You probably remember that sporangiospores are produced endogenously. That is, they are produced in a sac called the sporangium. In some fungi, the sporangiospores have flagella, while in others, they don't. The spores with flagella can move around by themselves, or in other words, they are motile. These spores are called zoospores. The spores without flagella are non-motile, and we call them aplanospores. The method of production of spores by sexual reproduction is a bit more complex. First, gametes have to be formed and then they have to fuse. This fusion of gametes produce the spores which are called zygospores. Now, the two gametes that are fusing may or may not differ in the way they look. In some fungi, they look very similar in size and shape. That is, we say they have similar morphology. This type of reproduction is called isogamous reproduction or isogamy. In some other fungi, the gametes are of different sizes. When these gametes fuse, we call it anisogamous reproduction or anisogamy. There are yet other fungi in which the two gametes are vastly different. The female gamete is large and non-motile. The male gamete is much smaller and can move around. The fusion between these two types of gametes is called oogamous reproduction or oogamy. What's going on there? Let me go and check it out. What do you think those dogs are looking for? Let me tell you. They are not looking for bones, but for something far more precious. The world's most expensive fungi, truffles. A kilogram of truffles can fetch you about 2 lakh rupees. So what do they use such expensive fungi for? Well, they have quite a unique taste. And for many people, this taste is totally worth the high price. Just add some truffle shavings or drizzle some truffle oil on ordinary food and see how it becomes extraordinary. Another fungus that is very expensive and hard to find is the morel. Doesn't it look like a brain? It too is considered a delicacy. Both morels and truffles belong to the class Ascomycetes under the kingdom fungi. This class includes both unicellular fungi like yeasts and multicellular fungi like Neurospora, Claviceps, Aspergillus and Penicillium. The multicellular fungi are all branched and septate. All these fungi are economically important, like morels and truffles. Let's see what each of these fungi has to offer. Yeasts are unicellular and microscopic. One of the most popular species of yeast is Saccharomyces cerevisiae. It is used for making bread and alcoholic beverages. Among the multicellular fungi, Neurospora is commonly found growing on the bark of trees after a forest fire or at campfire sites or even on bread. These icky molds on the trees are very important to scientists who use them extensively in research fields like biochemistry and genetics. Penicillium and Aspergillus are useful to us too. Penicillium produces penicillin, which was first antibiotic to be discovered. Aspergillus produces certain substances that can be used to treat cancer. It also produces citric acid, which is used as a preservative in packaged foods and drinks. However, not all fungi in Ascomycetes produce useful substances. For example, Claviceps produce certain nitrogen-containing compounds called alkaloids. A few of these alkaloids, if eaten, can induce hallucinations, convulsions, and even a loss of hands and feet. These alkaloids can also be used to make the synthetic drug LSD or lysergic acid diethylamide. LSD changes a person's perception of reality, which may sometimes lead to extreme consequences. Some people under its influence have been known to jump off high buildings to their deaths because they thought they could fly. Now that sounds scary, doesn't it? How do you think we found out about these deadly alkaloids made by Claviceps? To understand that, we have to look at how they get their nutrition. These are rye plants. The grains from these plants are used as food in many parts of the world. Now, notice that a few grains are black in color. How did this happen? Claviceps depend on rye plants for its nutrition. It is parasitic to them and causes a disease called ergot of rye. This disease makes the grains black and poisonous. When one eats them, they cause the horrible symptoms from the alkaloids that we saw earlier. But only some Ascomycetes, like Claviceps, get their nutrition by parasitism. Others, like yeasts, Aspergillus, Penicillium, Neurospora, morels, and truffles, depend on dead and decaying organisms. That is, these fungi are saprophytes. And then there are some Ascomycetes that like to obtain their nutrition from animal dung. These fungi are called coprophilous fungi. Wow! Do you know what's happening here? These dusty clouds coming out from these orange structures are the spores being released. And the orange structures are the fruiting bodies of these dung fungi. Do you remember what fruiting bodies are? Fruiting bodies are structures that specialize in spore production. The fruiting bodies produced by an Ascomycete fungus are called ascocarps. These ascocarps contain sac-like structure called asci or ascus in the singular form. These sac-like asci are characteristic to this class. Hence, these Ascomycetes are also called sac fungi. Inside the asci, sexual spores are produced, which are called ascospores. Ascomycetes can produce asexual spores as well. The members of Ascomycetes produce asexual spores exogenously, that is, outside the cells of the hypha. Can you guess the type of spores produced? Yes, they are conidia. Conidia are usually produced at the tip of a specialized hyphae called conidiophores. When the conidia mature, they detach and each of them can grow into a new mycelium. You must have noticed how wildly diverse fungi are, ranging from the well-known yeasts and molds to the less familiar truffles, morels, and sac fungi. And we have only looked at half of all the types of fungi out there. Be ready for more surprises.